Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Passion Pursuit Conversations with Creatives. Today, I am thrilled to introduce this woman. You guys, we talked all about leadership and leading yourself, really aligning what it is that you value most, how that filters into leading others, and so on and so forth, all things leadership. And this woman, you guys, is truly a gem of a human. We met this past year in Spain. We reconnected in Bali, and she's still traveling and adventuring. But I'm so excited to introduce Karina DeLeon. She is a leadership development professional. She's been traveling with Remote Years since September of 2022. Like, we should probably see how many countries she's been to, but it's amazing. She's from Miami, Florida, and she's also the host of her own podcast, The Wanderful People. You guys will absolutely adore this interview today, so be sure to tune in, listen all the way through. There's so many nuggets ahead, so many that await here for you, and follow along on her journey as well. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Passion Pursuit podcast. I'm your host, Haley Thomas, and I'm obsessed with helping you create a business that supports the life you dream about. I have worked with many entrepreneurs just like you who desire to make an impact and an income by doing what lights them up. Get ready to learn about the strategies, shifts, and stories that will equip and inspire you to take action. If you're ready to make your vision into a reality, then you've come to the right place. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back to another episode of the Passion Pursuit podcast, another amazing conversation with a fellow creative friend of mine. And you guys are in for a treat, because I have an amazing woman who just happens to be a friend that I met this last year on our remote year adventures in Spain, Karina DeLeon. And she, you guys, is going to just absolutely blow your socks off. She is somebody who has not only, been such an incredible inspiration and support on these travel adventures, but she is that person who's gotten me out of my comfort zone in the best of ways. Like, I'm telling you, the best of ways. Like, for example, I did post back 6 months ago about rock climbing. And the week before this, you guys, I said, I would never do that. I would never. I saw this guy on the side of the cliff and I was like, there's no way I would do that. And then a week goes by and she's telling me about this amazing adventure that they're doing early the next morning. And there's one spot that opens and she's like, you should do this. And I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, I'm terrified of heights. What if I freeze? And my mind's just like circling with all these doubts. And she's like, no, it'll be fun. And that's what I love about Karina, you guys, is she finds the joy in every single thing that she does and in every person that she's around. And lo and behold, I don't know how, I don't think anybody else would have gotten me on the side of a cliff, but somehow Karina got me to go. And it was one of the most incredible experiences of the entire month. Not to mention, I was so like in awe of the fact that I actually did the thing. It built confidence in me. Like, I don't think you realize the impact that that had on me, my friend, but I just want to thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone. But truly, like, that is a huge part of who she is. And from, a professional standpoint, she does amazing work in leadership, which we'll dive into today. But before I keep blabbing on, because I could talk amazing things about you all day long, I would love for you to share a little intro of who you are, what you're about, what you love, and where in the world are you in this moment?
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction, Haley. You are also incredible. And seeing you overcome your fear and do that was so inspiring for me. And I think that when we do small activities that push us out of our comfort zone, it is like an analogy for life. For me, it was like jumping off a cliff in Croatia. I remember looking down and I'm like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And then once you jump, you're just like, oh, I did it. It wasn't that hard, right? And so, yeah, I just want to say I'm very proud of you and you encourage me and I'm thankful that you're always down for my adventures. That being said, I'm Karina DeLeon. Thank you for having me on this podcast, and it's an honor. A little bit about me. I'm from Miami, Florida. I decided to be crazy and travel the world with Remote Year last September. I'm currently in Japan. So I've been traveling since September. I went back home for the holidays and then traveled again in January, back and forth because of work. So going into work, I have the honor and privilege, and I absolutely love what I do. I work for a global logistics company. Internally, I really do all of the leadership development, all of the learning development when it comes to how to be great leaders. So, all the soft skills training, understanding the importance of communication, the impact that you make. And I work for a global company, so there's a lot of people, a lot of leadership involved. I work specifically for the Americas, and it's been a really fun adventure. It's really fun being able to go into a class and teach like tenured leaders that have been leaders for 50 years and are listening and learning and reflecting. And I always tell people that I don't come in and teach you something new. It's maybe something that you've already heard of before, but you just haven't taken that time to self reflect and to assess and to lead intentionally. So that's what I get to do. And I'm happy to be here.
Wow, I love what you just shared at the end. It's like oftentimes we deep down know what we need to do to take action on something or to move forward in one aspect of our life, but oftentimes it's just that space to sit with it for a moment and to really audit, okay, where am I going? How am I getting there? I love that you just shared that because I feel like we're in, and maybe you can see this as well or notice this in work as well, but I find that we're in a society that's always just like running, that we don't really take that time and space to reflect on anything. And it's so important. It's so valuable to have that space.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree. I always say that it's like we're on a hamster wheel. We're just go, 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 go all the time. And everyone expects us to do 5 million things all the time. And then we're also supposed to take care of ourselves and do this and do that and
Yes.
take care of other people. And it's like, in order for us to pour out to people, we need to be pouring into ourselves, and just taking that time to reflect and think, wait a second, why did I react this way? What do I actually like? Asking yourself those questions and like really sitting with those situations can help us be more intentional, right? And show up more intentionally, to really be aligned with our values and how we want to show up and what we want to be known for. I think
Mm.
those things are important things to do that we do not do enough of for sure.
No, and it's so valuable, like really taking that time, especially aligning with your values. Like, really, I see this a lot with companies, right? Like every company, well, I should say, I find that the strongest companies have their values that are very, very crystal clear. And oftentimes I feel like personally, we don't do that work for ourselves, but it's really sitting and reflecting on like, what do I value most? And I did this a few years back and it completely changed the game for everything, every aspect of my life, because I started to use that as my compass. And it was that first filter. Like if an opportunity came or if a relationship is being formed, it's like, okay, but does this align with what I value the most? And really staying true to that, even when maybe it's not the easiest thing to do. Maybe you're in an environment that doesn't support that. But at the end of the day, it's like you staying true to yourself and authentically like leaning into what you value is one of the most freeing things and the biggest gifts that you could give to yourself. So I love that you shared how important your values are. Something that was so eye opening a few years back, I did a workshop on joy and I asked the question and gave space to what brings you joy? And
Mm.
it was honestly really surprising how difficult it was for people to sit with that question because it was the first time that they had ever reflected on what brings them joy. And then all of a sudden they're realizing, like, wow, I used to do this thing as a kid, or we used to do these fun date nights with my partner, or I used to play this game with my family. And they started listing all of these things out. And it was almost a space of rediscovery, kind of the same thing we talked about in the beginning. It's like you oftentimes know, but you just need that space to remember. And when they saw that, then they were able to say, okay, cool. How do I want to bring more joy into my life? Let's start with what I already know. Let's start with what's already present. And it's more of just the implementation from there. But now you have the evidence. You felt joy in the past and you can bring that to the forefront. But it starts with taking that step to reflect first.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that is such a good point because again, we usually don't do that. And you mentioned something in the beginning of your sentence or your statement is that in companies we have values and we have structure in companies. but we don't take that time to actually have that structure or be aligned with ourselves. And if we take so much time to work and so much of our time goes into our jobs, right, to develop companies and to really be aligned with those values, why not do that for ourselves? Why not do that for our relationships? You know, I've heard of couples who literally sit down once a week and just talk about what went well, what didn't go well, what can we reassess. And some people are like, I would never do that. But if you want a healthy relationship, then sometimes it's going to take some of that work to realign and to communicate. Because if we don't, then we're just going to maybe put things under the rug, we're going to forget, and then it'll pop up in different areas, right? And the same thing in our lives. If we just kind of go,
Mm. It's
we're not going to be aligned. And like you said, it's a filter for us, right? So if we understand what is my goal in 5 years, or what is my goal in this area, now I know, are my decisions aligned with that? And you can change, you can be flexible, but at least having that groundedness in order to really keep you accountable for yourself.
absolutely. And it's like looking at, okay, what do you value? How are you implementing that into your life? And really kind of auditing everything. And what a beautiful time to do this. Like, especially as we end this year, move into a new year, it's such a good time to reflect. And so when you think about these aspects of your life, like really thinking, okay, what do I truly value? What really, really matters most to me? And is my current life and how I'm operating, is it supporting that? Or is it taking me away from what I value most? And then reassess. And then in relationships, like this is something that I started doing a really long time ago. And I found so much value in it for myself. But then I realized like, oh, I want to grow and do this with my husband. Like I want us to grow and do this together. And then I brought the same aspect on. I was like, I want to give this to my clients. And then it just continued to filter from there. But something that Brian and I do every new year is we sit down and we reflect on 6 different areas of ourselves and of our professionals. So it'll be like our physical health, mental, spiritual, financial, social, and then our business or career. And we reflect on, okay, what are we focused on for this year? What matters to us in these areas? And then what can we implement? What is the action step? Because it's one thing to reflect, it's another thing to then, okay, what do you do with this information? So we kind of have part one, part two. But having that space to reflect and do that together is so powerful because then I can support him, he can support me. And it makes such a huge difference. I feel like when you have someone in your corner who's not just keeping you accountable, but who is hyping you up as you continue to stay aligned to what matters to you most. So I love that you brought that up in like all these different areas. It's so important.
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned is super important as well when it comes to the accountability and the action, because you can sit there and assess and reflect, but if you know the information but you don't apply it, then it goes out of the window, right? And so really being able to raise your hand and ask for support if you need it, having grace with yourself as well, because right, like sometimes we think we need to get to this level today, and it's like, no, baby steps, right? What can I actually realistically do today to get me closer to my goal tomorrow? And whose support do I need? And communicating those things along the way, I think, are important as well. And going back to understanding values, I think you mentioned a point about when you asked about what brings you joy. A lot of people had a hard time answering that question. I also, in my workshops at work, I'll ask people to list 10 things that make them who they are. And oh my goodness, so many people struggle with that as well
Mm,
because they haven't asked themselves, who am I? I had one lady who is a mother and her kids are now older, and she's like, my whole identity, my whole life has been being a mom. I don't even know who I am anymore. You know, and it broke my heart because I'm like, being a mother is
mm,
amazing, but you're also so much more than that, right? And so really being
mm,
understanding of who am I think that's one of the things that can help us be aligned in understanding what our values are. Another thing is thinking about the people that you admire and why you admire them, and thinking of the values that they have. Those are the things that are important to you,
mm,
right? So there's a lot of small activities and things that you can ask yourself to understand what is most important to you. And then from there, seek, okay, am I doing good in this area? If not, whose support do I need? What do I need to do? Right. And that's really holding yourself accountable and really seeking for that help and seeing realistically how you can get aligned with those values.
So good. And that honestly makes me think, when we're talking about leadership today as our topic at hand, and we're talking a lot about values and kind of getting aligned and taking those action steps to figure these pieces out. And what comes to mind is that self leadership, right? Leading yourself. Oftentimes I find when we first talk about leadership, we think leading other people, but there's also that same element that goes on with leading yourself and leading yourself in your own life. And so I'd love to know, if you think about, especially this past year with all of the adventures and travel, like how have you implemented self leadership practices? What are those things? How have you continued to kind of come back to really being mindful of how you're leading your life?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many things. I think all of us can probably relate to this. But I think, um, well, first of all, I think it's understanding this whole year has been a whole year of travel, right? And I decided to start traveling honestly after a breakup, which is not new for a lot of people. Usually people are like, all right, I'm free. I'm going to go travel the world and do all these things, right? But I knew that I wanted to travel from a very early age. I was in college and I went to study abroad in Spain. Actually, I was in Sevilla, and I was like, I want to travel. This is amazing. Like being here is so inspiring. I've only ever been in Florida, right? My whole life. I traveled to the Dominican Republic because my family's from there to see my family there. Um, but I was like, I want to see the world. And I always wanted to, but then things got in the way, right? I was in school, and then after school I had to find a job, and then I was in a relationship, and then that one didn't work out, and I got into another, right? So it's just always something there. And for the first time, I realized, wait a second, what do I want to do? Right now I'm by myself. I'm in a place where I can do this financially, right? Like I understand I have a job that lets me work remotely. Why not take advantage of this right now? And so I did, and it was amazing. And I think that in itself
Mm.
is a way to lead yourself, is to really be aligned and understanding who are you, have self-awareness. And I always laugh about this, but I think for a long time, I found myself always accommodating to those around me, right? Like someone would ask me, what's an ideal day for you? What's the perfect day?
Mm.
And I wouldn't know how to answer that. I'm like, I don't know. My ex-boyfriend liked to go watch soccer, and that's what we would do. And so I was like, I like to go watch soccer, and I love soccer, but that's not my ideal day. Like, right? Now I can say, I know that going on a boat in the middle of the ocean with the sun on my face, like that is the perfect day for me, right? Being with my friends, having coconut water, like that is ideal for me. Um, but I wouldn't have known that if I wouldn't have taken that time to really reflect and just to pause and ask, wow, it's what did I learn in this point of my life and that got me to where I am now? And I think a lot of times when things don't work out in life, we can really beat ourselves up. We can be mad at ourselves or look at all the things that went wrong. But I think what we have to do is be curious, right? And everyone laughs at me because I'm always saying be curious, not
Mm.
judgmental. If you watch Ted Lasso, it's a great show, highly recommend. But it's from there, right? Be curious, not judgmental. And I think one of the most important ways to lead yourself is to be curious with yourself. And once you do that, then again, you'll start making decisions to understand, wait, huh, I've always wanted to do this. So now I'm going to do it. And then it's taking that action, like you mentioned, right? And so that's what I've been
Mm.
doing this whole year is traveling. And I'm super thankful that I took that leap of faith. I didn't know where I was going to go or how I was going to plan out or how I was going to pay for it. But I was like, I'm going to do this, right? So I packed up my apartment. I rented it out. I sold my car, and I was like, all right, let's do this. And I think that's it. It's just taking that leap, taking that leap, taking that leap, not having all the answers, but ultimately just knowing here's my first step, and I'm taking one step at a time, one step at a time. It's going to get me there. And if it's not where I intended to be, I'm going to be more curious and figure it out, and I believe in God, and I'm like, either way, I'm going to be okay. I'm protected, Um, and I think just that's what kind of drives you. That's what kind of helps you not fear, right? Um, and I think I've done a lot of that throughout the year, is really understanding. And as you travel, you learn a lot as well. So something as simple as understanding that I need a routine, right? So being able to play soccer, wake up on time, sleep well, those things are important to me. And if I don't lead myself, then I'm going to let myself fall in those areas. And that's not healthy for me, right? So it's kind of just understanding what you need and then living in line with that and making sure that you're holding yourself accountable and having self discipline, which I think a lot of us don't like that word, but it makes a big difference.
So does. I love what you said. I love be curious. And this is something external that can serve us so well, of obviously being curious about the world around you, about other people, about different cultures, different music. I mean, there's so much that there is externally, but I also love being curious internally and trying to create that deeper understanding of what's happening in here. And something that you said is like deepening your self-awareness. Something that I have found I've been working on is giving myself more space to feel things fully and really, not judging, giving myself grace and getting curious with the emotion that's present. So if I am feeling maybe a little bit grumpy one day, rather than just being like, oh, I'm grumpy today, and just like allowing that to just be, I'm like, okay, let's sit with this for a second. Like, what's happening internally? What is frustrating me in this moment? Is there something that I can do to fix this? Or maybe do I just need the space to feel that? But I get more and more curious with the emotion, because oftentimes there's a surface reason and then there's a deeper meaning and a deeper. And that's more than just emotions, right? Like, even to kind of going back to joy, it's like, what are the things that brought me joy? Why do they bring me joy? What excites me about them? Like, always asking more and more questions to just dig a little bit deeper and have a better understanding of who you are as a person, how you best operate, right? Like, speaking of having a routine, like, that about yourself through experience of having one and also of not having one, which is best for you in feeling your best and truly thriving in the environment that you've been in this last year. And so, okay, I'm going to go to a new country this month. My first priority is to create that routine, because I know that that's going to best support who I am and what I need to feel at my best. But would you have known that without giving yourself the space to ask those questions and to really check in on, like, okay, what do I need to feel good in this? How do I need to feel supported? Not being afraid to ask for help as well. It's like, when you know yourself, you start to realize that you kind of step into a little bit more of a confidence, because not only do you realize you can create a lot of what you need, but then you also know how you can ask for support or help from those that are around you once you have that knowledge of yourself. So I love that you shared that curiosity, because I feel like that can lead us in the most beautiful of way and help us to just have a deeper understanding of more than just the world, but within ourselves as well. So good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's very easy for us to blame other people for our actions. Oh, well, this person made me do this. And it's like, no one made you do anything, right? And I think sometimes we associate the norm with that. So if someone punches you in the face, of course you're going to fight back. Obviously. Well, do you have to fight back? What if you didn't fight back? What would that look like? Right? And that's like an example of that curiosity. What if you just asked, why did you punch me? That would throw them off guard. You're not going to fight me back? Right? And it's something so simple like that, but it just shows that it's not normal to think that way. And that's where I think the biggest piece of self-awareness comes in, where you can realize and finally say, wait. I'm the one that controls how I show up. I'm in control of my actions, of understanding my values, not blaming other people, or taking ownership over ourselves, not having a victim mentality, right? I think that's the easy way, unfortunately. But I do think it makes a really big difference in every aspect of our lives.
You mentioned the word ownership and discipline as well. And two words, responsibility, discipline, ownership. Like those are words that oftentimes we're like, okay, like I know that, if I create this routine, I should be more disciplined. I know it would support me. But sometimes I find that like we resist the things that most support us, or we resist the things that we need the most. And that's where it comes back to you and you taking that self-responsibility of like every aspect of your day. There's a choice involved in more than one. There's a choice in what you're putting in your body. There's a choice in how you're moving. There's, a choice even to the extent, like sometimes the work that you do to an extent, right? Like I know sometimes circumstances keep us from certain choices, but a lot of the way that we go about our day is a choice. And how can we take ownership of ourselves, of our emotions, of the space to reflect, and really, again, kind of getting aligned with how we best need what we need to move throughout our day. But it starts with you taking that self responsibility to first reflect and then, of course, to implement it and take action. Like you could come up with the most amazing routine all day that would support you. But if you're not actively putting yourself in the place of implementing that, it doesn't matter if that routine is on a piece of paper. It will do you no good because you have to still show up. You still have to take that self responsibility to lead your life in the way that would best support you. So two words that I find that's like, oh, I know, but I'm telling you, it's like, it's so, so, so important when it comes to leading yourself. It doesn't mean this work is easy, but it's important and it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's the piece right there, is the choice. We all have a choice every single day in every aspect, right? So sometimes we wake up and we're like, oh my goodness, it's Monday. I have to go to work. You have a choice. You don't have to go to work, but you want that house. You want to go on that vacation. You want that car. So you're choosing to go to work, right? And I think understanding the choice that you make every day matters. Like, how am I going to show up? You can come to work and be sad about your life and hate your coworkers and get super angry at this, right? Or you can say, you know what? I'm so thankful to wake up today. I'm thankful for the job that I have that provides for this food and this house and me being able to travel. You asked me about implementing ownership traveling and the leadership aspect. I think that's a big one right there. It's so easy, right? I'm in Asia right now. And yes, sometimes you can complain, oh my goodness, I have to work overnight. But I'm in Asia. Like, my job lets me travel and do this. I'm so thankful, you know? I'm thankful that I get to sleep 8 hours every night or during the day here, right? Like, everything is a choice that you make. And I think that's a really, really good reminder for us. And like you mentioned, we don't like the word discipline. We don't like the word accountability. But I think all of that stems in understanding what you need in order to make those decisions, right? So, for example, when we maybe get really drunk one night, have you ever woken up the next day and be like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? But you have a choice, right? And so understanding, okay, if I don't want to stay out late before work and get super drunk and I'm not going to produce my best work at work, I have the choice to not drink, right? And I've seen it so much that we go into an environment and someone's like, man, I wish I could just say no. And I'm like, you can say no. People might look at you weird, but who cares? Right. And that's going back to being grounded in who you are and understanding your values. And the people that are genuinely going to care for you will stick around. And if they don't, then you probably don't want them around anyways, right?
Mic drop. Yes. And this is what is aligned and what is not. And sometimes it doesn't, again, it's not easy. There may be relationships that you have to create a little bit of distance from if things are not aligning with what you value most or are influencing you in a way that is going against what you value most. It's like you, again, you get that choice. And something you said as well in terms of discipline, right? I feel like it's all a perspective. If that word is feeling like icky, let's switch the perspective, right? It's like everything's a choice. And one thing that comes to mind is your perspective. And so maybe you are in a circumstance, or maybe you are in a career that is driving you nuts and is really not what you thought it would be, or you're unhappy, or even what you shared of like, I have to work during the day, or sorry, work during the night, sleep during the day. It's like, yeah, is that the most ideal setup? No, your circadian rhythm is all over the place. Your body is kind of going through the motions, but at the same time, you get to choose at the very minimum your perspective on the situation. And I always love, and I know this is probably so overheard, but it's such a good reminder, like the simple word switch from, oh, I have to do this to I get to do this.
Mm.
And even just saying that, even like, oh, I have to go to work today, rather than, oh, I get to go to work today, it instantly is completely different in how it just makes you feel inside and how it's spoken out loud. It puts you into the state of gratitude. It reminds you of why you're doing what you're doing, or at the very least gives you that space to reflect. But just that simple one word shift makes all the difference. Or another example of something that made me laugh so much years ago is a mentor of mine. She shared how people will often be like, I'm so frustrated by this. And they use this to express this like annoyance. And it just felt really icky and kind of negative. And she's like, okay, I'm going to try something. If something's frustrating me, I'm going to go, I'm so fascinated by this. And every time she would say that, it would actually make her laugh, because it's like such a, like in a frustrating situation, somebody's just like, I'm fascinated by this. And it instantly lightens the mood. And also, too, is a way for you to express, but in a different light, which is so important in not only leading yourself, but also, too, like, we're talking today as well, just slightly about leading other people and how leading from that lens makes a world of difference. Because I can tell you, I've been in some toxic work environments, and I've been in others that lead with that shift in perspective and who uplift the room that they're in and make everyone feel encouraged and involved and heard. And it's so different. So when especially in the work that you're doing, what do you find is most supportive when it comes to being a leader of other people and really staying grounded to be able to hold yourself to lead a group? Because that's a whole other ball game, right? Like taking
Mm.
yourself and then some.
Yeah. So, very good question. And I honestly think you answered it as you were speaking about perspective, because that right there is the biggest piece.
Mhm.
I think number one, understanding your impact. And that can go to leading yourself too, understanding the impact
Mm.
that perspective makes, and then understanding the impact that you have over your team. I think that a lot of times maybe we can have our blinders on and just kind of, we're used to being individual contributors, and now we're in charge of a team, and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to deal with this and that and this and that. But if you change your perspective, you understand, wait, my job is to develop my people. My job is to help them perform at their natural best. I'm not babysitting someone. I'm not, right, dealing with people who are stupid. If someone doesn't know, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. It just means that we got to learn some things, right? And so it's always that perspective. And I think that is the key to life. And I think going back to curiosity, right? Just understanding the impact that you make with your team and recognizing it starts with you. So having the discipline for yourself, being able to pour into your cup so that you can pour out to others. And another analogy I like to use is we should always be a sponge, right? We're always sponges, observing, learning, being curious, so that when we're under pressure, when you squeeze that sponge, what comes out of you? Whatever you put into it, right? And I think in our leadership, that can be really beneficial. So as a leader, continuing to grow, to develop, to be curious, right? To have that growth mindset, so that when you show up for your team, you're able to pour out to them because you've been filled. Um, and just recognizing that you make an impact. I think a lot of us forget that.
It starts with you, honestly, like as a leader, especially for those who are leaders of people. It starts with you first, leading yourself. And this even makes me, I feel like this, I love that this conversation is almost coming full circle because we started and talked about mission and values and how important that is as an individual to lead your life. And then I think about from a company standpoint and from leading a team, it's like when you have a mission and you have values, then everybody feels like they are a part of something that is bigger than themselves. And that is like one of the most, I find the powerful ways to lead and to grow is to have that so clear and defined. And everyone sees the part that they're playing, everyone sees their bigger purpose within that mission. Like having that as a company is everything when it
Oh
comes
yeah.
to leading and really having a team that backs the vision of where you're wanting to go. But again, it starts with having that clearly defined. And I work with a lot of solopreneurs who haven't hired quite yet. And I think about like, okay, start now. Like you should be so crystal clear right now on what your specific mission is for your company, whether it is literally and just me, myself, and I, like if it's just you in the company right now, like still being so clear on what that mission is, what is your desired impact? How do you want people to feel when they're a part of either your team company down the road, or how do you want clients to feel? You know, what do you guys value? What are you putting out there? And does it reflect that? And, you know, kind of coming back. And then as you're bringing in other people, it's like, well, this is the captain of the ship right here is the mission and the values and what we're standing behind. And I feel like that piece is just such an incredibly important part of leading in any scenario. Yourself, a team, a full blown global company. It's like such an important part.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think as you're speaking, I reflect on. So when I was in college, I was in a sorority, and being part of the organization, they were always like, "Be careful what you do." Right? When you go to those tailgates, when you go to those parties, you're representing something bigger than yourself. And a lot of the girls are like, "Oh, whatever. Don't tell me what to
Mm,
do. I'm gonna do me." Right? And I think there's like a disconnect sometimes. Because yes, you don't want to live your life to please everybody else because that's impossible. You can't do that. But there's a different aspect when it comes to discipline and understanding what you're aligned with. So if you want to be aligned with doing all of these things and you're if you're okay with that, great. But if you look back and you don't feel good about the person that you're representing or the company that you're representing or whatever it is that you're aligned with, then it's time to reassess. And it helps us to live more intentionally, I think. So I think changing our perspective to someone's trying to control me in order to make me look good to how do I want to be aligned? What kind of person, what kind of, what do I want people to say about
mm,
me? Right? That's a big thing is really reflecting in at my funeral or when I'm 90 years old at my birthday party. What do I want my family, my friends, my coworkers, what do I want them to say about me? And am I living in alignment to that person? Right. And I think we do that a lot for companies, but not enough with ourselves. And I think it's important for both. It's important for our own company, like you mentioned, if you're an entrepreneur, even if it's your one person entrepreneur, because it's good to start now than to be reactive. It's better to be proactive. It's good to ask yourself, are you aligned with the company values that you're in right now if you work for a bigger company? And then also for yourself, right? To
mm.
ask yourself those questions because that's how
I
we can make better decisions.
I love that you shared that too in the span of like it's you may be involved in something company organization sorority, but maybe you're like, well, I want to do this. Well, maybe that's evidence that what you're a part of may not actually be aligned with what is most important to you as an individual. And it's not to say it's good or bad. I'm sure there's extreme examples that are, but I think back to that of like working for a company that felt for me very toxic, but for other people they actually really loved it. And so it's a matter of what I value in my life did not align with how that company was run or what this company valued. And so it was not the best fit for me. And I was removed myself from that situation where it may be someone's bread and butter and they may absolutely love being a part of that. And so it's just important to, again, when you have that awareness, you're able to make confident and aligned decisions that are in not only your best interest, but in those of the people that are around you as well. So, so important. Oh my goodness.
I
I
love
would love to. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
sorry. I love what you said right there. And I think it's a point that we miss sometimes is sometimes when we have our values, we tend to grab onto them so tightly, or even our opinions, that we dismiss the other opinions and other values. And we think ours are only correct and
Mm,
everyone else is wrong. And it's always you versus me. And I think that's why we become so separated, right? When you go through things in your life and you're like, oh, I know for sure this is how it is. But someone else may have gone through something and looked at it maybe different, right? And it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just different. And if we can start to rewire our brain to
mm,
understand that, we're going to be less judgmental. We're going to start collaborating better with people. If there's a disagreement, we're not going to take it personal because we understand you have a different perspective. You've gone through different life experiences. You look at it differently. So instead of judging, you're going to ask, how did you get there? Help me understand. And I think that's a really, really good piece. I have a story personally where I worked at a recruiting agency honestly for like 3 months. It was like not my forte. I was not happy there. I was like, this is toxic. This is terrible. And I quit. And maybe a year or two later, my friend's boyfriend at the time was interviewing at that same place. And I was like, don't work there. You're going to hate it. He ended up applying. He interviewed, he got the job, and he's been there for like 7 years. He loves it. So I bit my tongue. I was like, "Ooh, I shouldn't have said that,"
wow.
right? So it humbles you a little bit. You're like, man, and so you really never know. And I think that's really important to never be bitter. We're gonna go through life experiences, and even if someone is really hurtful towards you or spiteful, or you had a really negative experience with a person, a place, a situation, never talk badly about it. Always learn from it. And I think that can really help us in our perspective as well. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to add that in there. I thought it
Mm.
was important.
No, I'm so glad you shared this. Honestly, it's like, again, that reminder that what may be amazing for you or maybe terrible for you may be somebody else's joy. And also it's like, I think it's important to share your experience, but from a place of this was my experience, not to say that somebody else, like you said, your friend who applied, it's like that his may be an entirely different experience. Like I even think about this from a travel standpoint of like some of the places I've gone and people have had a really negative opinion about a certain place. And then it ends up being like one of my favorite places to travel to. And it's like, okay, what if I had listened to this one person's experience and was like, oh, well, maybe I won't go after all. Like, and not, obviously I want to take ownership of my own and find out for myself. But that comes from self-awareness and trust that I have to still take action, even if someone's opinion may not support that, to really honor what's going on here. But it's like, I have to remind myself of that as well. And when I'm explaining my own experience, to be like, this was mine. I take ownership of this. There was even like, I think about, we were just together in Bali this last month, and it was an amazing place for sure. And there were also some really challenging parts for me personally that I kind of navigated last month. And I could make that the whole story of Bali. I could share, oh well, it was this and it was that, and make it just so negative and like spread that like wildfire. Or I could be like, okay, no, actually, there were some epic moments. I have some amazing memories. And yeah, there were also some hard moments as well, but so is life, like the ebbs and flows and the duality of holding both. But I want to make sure, and I was sharing, it's so funny, this is so present because I was sharing my experience of Bali with a friend who's about to go. And I made sure, and I'm so glad because now I'm like, okay, cool. I'm off the hook here with this conversation. Like I made sure to be like, this was my experience. Like these were the parts, and this is why it affected me. But you may have like an entirely different experience, and that's totally fine as well. So I think again, just being mindful and taking that ownership of what you want, even with the opinions around you, and also too what you're sharing from your own specific experience. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
thank you. No, but there was something I was going to say, and it was really good. Oh, um, so as you're speaking, I'm thinking about a book called The Four Agreements. Have you read the book before?
Oh, so good.
It's so good. It's one of like
Yes.
my favorite books of all time. And I think it encompasses all of the things that we've talked about today. So being impeccable with your word is one of them. And that goes in every aspect. We can be really hard on ourselves when we make mistakes. We can talk badly about people and gossip, and what's that going to do? It's not going to help. It's not going to help anyone. I know sometimes we say it's good to vent. It's helpful to vent. Yeah, but are you venting because you just want to talk bad about someone to put them down, or are you venting with a purpose? And I think that's another piece for leaders as well, is be mindful of the impact that you make. So if you are dealing with maybe an employee that is giving you a hard time and it's not easy, and you're talking to your coworker about, oh my goodness, can you believe this employee? Right? It's one thing to do that, or to go and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this one employee. What do you think I should do about it? I think that's really, really important as well. Um, to really change our perspectives, our intention. What kind of intention do we want to set? The other one is not taking things personal, which is what we mentioned now, right? Is understanding everyone has their own perspective and experiences. And if someone flicks you off and curses at you, you know what? You're having a bad day. I'm not going to take that personal. But easily, oh, how dare you talk to me like that? Do you know who you're talking to, right? And we can just understand
Mm.
to not operate at this level, but come down here, and now we can choose to respond instead of react, which I think is important. The other one is always try your best, right? Sometimes your best is going to look different in different areas of your life. And you and I talked about that earlier as well, is I've been struggling in Asia. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy working these hours and having my circadian rhythm all over the place. So my best now is going to look differently than my best working in the US or working in Europe. And I compare. There's times where I compare, and I'm like, man, I was doing so well in Cape Town. I was on it. I was inspired. I was motivated. And right now, I'm
Mm.
slacking. So it's having that grace with yourself and knowing, you know what, I'm trying the best that I can right now, and not beating yourself up because you can't be at this level, right? So it's taking baby steps. Even if you go a little bit today, you're still getting closer to your destination. You may not have to sprint the whole time, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So I think really taking these things into consideration are really, really beneficial. And I also want to commend you, Haley, on, I think, what you, even in Bali, I saw a lot of noise, right? I may have even been one of those noises that you were asking for advice and seeking like advice from other people. And you do a really good job at listening to what people have to say, but not taking everything. Because if we do that, we're going to probably like shift so much and try to make everyone happy and change our minds so many times, right? We're able to be curious and learn, but also be grounded and understand what you stand for, and be able to take ownership over your decisions. I think that that's a really important thing when we are making decisions and asking for feedback and
Mhm.
asking for support. You don't need to take everything all the time, but really own your decisions and own the way that you show up.
I appreciate that. I was reflecting actually today and sharing my Bali experience with my friend about my last minute decision to change my flight and to miss the holiday at home and to stay because there was this experience to see the Komodo Island in the group. It felt like this thing I'd been thinking about for the weeks prior, but just I wasn't even allowing myself to imagine the possibility, but it was in my head for weeks. And I was struggling with this aspect of like, okay, I'm feel like I'm going to regret not doing this and not staying. But I kept like shoving it away because I, at the end of the day, was kind of what you shared. Like I was thinking about the opinions of others. I was definitely thinking about pleasing, those in my life and making sure that I was home. Like that felt like the thing I should be doing. And not that that's a bad thing. I want to obviously preface this. Like I am so grateful for the family that I have. And obviously Brian, my spouse, that they have this amazing support in me to have been able to even travel in the way that I did this year. And so we get to like this last day and it's weighing on me so heavily. And I realize like, I genuinely think I will regret not staying. And that decision was one of the hardest to make because it did mean that I may disappoint someone in my life. It may mean that I receive judgment or maybe like a misunderstanding. It may mean a lot of things, but I knew that for me, I could not leave knowing full well that I would be walking with regret that I did not stay. And so like having made that decision, I remember like, okay, if I go and I go back home, I'm going to own it. But if I stay, I'm also going to own it. And so if I stay, I'm going to remove the guilt because I'm here and I'm going to own that and I'm going to be here and I'm going to be fully present. And I feel like that weekend I did allow myself to fully experience that. And it was one of the most amazing experiences ever. Like the things that we saw that weekend and just the community to share it with. Like I'm so grateful. And so it's again like even in those hardest of moments where you are facing that adversity, whether it's internal, external, like sometimes the fight is with yourself, right? And the voices that are going back and forth in your own head. It's like no matter what, though, at the end of the day, it's like you have a choice. And then once you make that decision, own it, own it, own it, own it. Even if, again, there's things and adversity around. So I appreciate you reflecting that to me because, yeah, it was definitely a challenge in that later part of the month. But I'm grateful for how everything unfolded and so grateful to have had that experience with you.
No, you inspire me, and I think you're so brave. And I told you that earlier as well. But yeah, I think a big piece of a lot of us, and right, like we don't like to take ownership of our decisions. That's why we love talking to other people and, oh, this, you influenced me. And I did this because I heard this, or I did this because you did that. But one of the bravest things that you can do is really listen, of course, be curious, like we mentioned, but then take ownership. Decide and take ownership over those decisions and not blame everybody else because of the things that you do. Or maybe you do something and you regret it. Well, why do you regret it? Right? So now moving forward, you know what your line, what your values are, right? So really asking yourself those questions will again go back to those values to help you stay grounded in what it is that's important to you. Ask yourself those questions, right? And for you, what was important is exploring those Komodo Islands, to be with community, traveling, right? Like that's important to you. And it doesn't mean that your family's not important to you, that your spouse is not important to you, but also pleasing everybody else is not important to you, right? And that's okay. That's okay because that's probably not something that we want, right? Like we shouldn't live to please everybody else. It's going to make a really hard life for us. And so I think it's just really inspiring. I think it's really inspiring to be able to make decisions based off of knowing who you are and what you want.
Hmm. Well, my friend, I feel like we could talk for like 3 hours, probably a full day, to be honest, because there's just, I feel so aligned in what you shared. And like, I could see this conversation being hours long if I let it be, but I know that it is about time for you to go to sleep. And which is so strange because I'm about to eat dinner. It's just like the funniest thing to me. I love time zones are just mind blowing to me. It's so strange. But I would love to close us out with one final question that I love to ask on these podcasts, as a fellow creative. What does it mean to be a creative to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think we're all creative, even if you don't identify yourself as creative, you are creative. You have the power to create something, whether it's an idea, right? A relationship, whether it's art, whether it's music, whatever that looks like. And I think the more intentional we are about asking those questions, about showing up by being intentional, that's how we can be creative, right? Allow yourself to just be. I think in that we create. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe it's very poetic, but I really do think that just showing up is the most important thing. And showing up for yourself, showing up for those around you, that's where we can be creative. Wow, I just surprised myself. I was like,
thank you. And where can we find you? Yes, it's a beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Where can the listeners find you and follow you, and also your podcast as well? I'll make sure to link in the show notes, because Karina is also a podcast host and definitely one that you'll want to listen to and follow along with. But yeah, where can everybody find you?
By the way, before we move forward, Haley, you are amazing. You inspired me to start that podcast and to start that business and start all of those ventures. So thank you for igniting a fire inside of me to want to be more creative in those aspects. But you can find me on Instagram at Karina V DeLeon. So that's Karina, Karina V like Victor, and then DeLeon, DeLeon. And my podcast is the Wanderful People podcast. So the slogan there is wherever you wander, stay full of wonder. So the Wanderful People. That's on Spotify, on Apple. I'm uploading it on Google as well, or on YouTube, I think. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I just can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talking about leadership with me and all the things. And yes, be sure to follow along Karina's adventure. She's got more travels coming up, so definitely some fun things to look out for, especially with the podcast. And I'm looking forward to the amazing people that you're going to be interviewing as well, just through the process of all of your adventures. So more to come. Like, truly, I believe the best is yet to come. And I'm excited that we get to continue this beautiful life adventure together. And I can't wait to see where I'll see you in the world next.
I agree. Thank you so much, Haley, for having me on this podcast. I appreciate you. You inspire me all the time. And thank you for being such an inspiration and just being willing to always ask questions, to be curious, to learn from each other. And yeah, you definitely have the spirit in you that inspires, right? You empower and inspire, and you've empowered me to do things that I never thought I'd be possible of doing as well. You always tell me that I'm like inspiring you to take risks and do these things, but you also inspire me. So thank you. And I look forward to our future connections wherever we are in the world.
I will see you soon, my friend. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Can I ask you a huge favor before hopping off? Would you share this podcast if you enjoyed the episode? I know more dreamers out there need this encouragement in their ears, and it's this community that helps to spread the word. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon.